Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted, the show where we talk to people about what they believe and why every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time. I am your host tonight, ObjectivelyDan. Joining me is my cat, Pico, who's decided that he just wants to cuddle and did it like 5 minutes before the show. So he's just going to be here now, and that's just going to be a thing. And also joining me tonight is the one and only mastermind behind the scenes and also host of The Nonprofits. It's Jason Sherwood. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dan, pleasure to be here. But, I see you have Pico there, so I guess I can just, take off.
Well, I don't think Pico's going to be very good at actually taking calls, so I am going to need your help tonight. So you should stick right there. But Jason, this is your first time doing the call-in show thing, except for the time where you had to cover for me. That one time a few weeks ago, and that was really fun. And because of that, there were a lot of comments of people saying, hey, we should get Jason on the show. Like, Jason should just be a guest. So we got you on and thought that you'd be a great guest. And boy, Jason, you picked a humdinger of a week to be on the show, huh?
Oh yeah. This has been a rough week for, well, a certain group of people, but people in general, of course.
I think it's a rough week for every American citizen.
Yes.
And I should clarify, everybody also living in the United States that may not also be a citizen as well. What we're talking about, folks, in case you're not familiar, is the Supreme Court has been pretty wild this week. There may be some other decisions that we talk about, but the big one that we should definitely talk about is that the Supreme Court has recently overturned 50 years of precedent and has overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, Roe v. Wade in this country has sanctified the rights for access to abortion for pretty much everyone here. And because that decision has been overturned, that now means that states have the opportunity to decide what kinds of abortion care they want to give to people. And in some states, it is outright banned. In some states, like in Texas, we have trigger laws where it's going to be banned. And in other places, it's very limited access, 6 weeks sometimes, 15 weeks sometimes. It's very, very bad for pretty much everybody involved. And it's a pretty heavy topic tonight. So we definitely want to talk to you guys about this topic. We'll, of course, take other calls that come in too. But, I mean, this is the one that's really weighing heavy on us right now. Jason, how has this decision affected you? What have you been thinking about this?
Well, it obviously doesn't really affect me directly. It does affect, I am married, and my wife is really upset. Not that she would want to get an abortion if we ever did happen to get her pregnant, but the fact that she is being told that she doesn't have rights to her own body.
Yeah.
Other women do not have rights to their own body, that other people with uteruses, because let's not exclude people, don't have rights to their body, is absolutely abhorrent.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, insurance has no problems with paying for vasectomies, paying for Viagra. We are guys, penis owners, are on the winning side. And that's not cool. There shouldn't be a winning side. There should just be people who get to live their damn lives.
Yeah. So, I think I wanted to talk about some statistics. I wanted to talk about why this is such an important issue, and in particular, why a show like ours is really talking about this, right? Because there's a myriad of political topics that we could deep dive into. Why is this one in particular, why does a show like this care about this? For a couple of reasons. One, obviously, this affects the lives of women. This affects the lives of trans men. This affects the lives of non-binary folks. This affects the lives of lots and lots of people. And this also affects the lives of people who don't have uteruses, or people who are also, involved in these kinds of relationships that are bringing life into the world, who are now having to deal with the circumstances and the consequences that this decision has led to. And it didn't have to be this way. Like, there was nothing that said this had to be done. This was the decision of six people in our Supreme Court out of 9 who decided that this needed to be overturned. The reasoning for this is, before it was protected on what the case was decided under a constitutional right for women to have access to an abortion. Now this has been overturned. I mean, when I was in school, this was taught as a landmark case. This was taught as set precedent that would be really unthinkable, honestly, in being overturned. And yet here we are. And another thing I have to point out in talking about this is we specifically trusted, I didn't specifically trust, but the people of America specifically trusted that the judges that were currently in the office right now would not do this. Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett are all on record, all of them, for saying that they were not interested in overturning the precedent of Roe v. Wade. And here we are today, standing in a country that is no longer going to have those rights. So some of you may say, well, is it really that big of a deal? Can't people just go to other states? Isn't this just like a states' rights issue? Isn't this good for people to make those own decisions?
Sometimes they can't.
Sometimes they can't, but let's talk about logistics here, okay? In just this last year alone, since September of last year, when Texas started the 6-week abortion ban, a lot of people can't figure out that they're pregnant in the amount of time necessary to get an appointment to do that. So what do? They go to other states to figure that out. And neighboring states, including that of Louisiana and other places, have been overloaded with appointments to try to figure out how they can get these procedures done. And with this new law going into effect, it's going to absolutely overload the system that we already have in place. The closest place you can go to in Texas right now for most people is going to be New Mexico, right? For those of you who aren't from the United States and don't realize the distance there, that is if you live in East Texas, New Mexico is literally an entire day's drive to get over there. And that's just the drive. That's not in factoring the time you have to make the appointment, time that you have to take off work if you're working, tons of other factors that you have to consider in something that shouldn't have been done, in my opinion. Should not have been done. Now, again, why are we talking about this? Not just because this affects everybody, but because this decision was religiously motivated. Was it written in the opinion for Clarence Thomas? No, I don't think so. From what I've seen, there's been no specific language. But the lobbying for this issue in this country has been almost exclusively done by the evangelical right, by Catholic Christians, and by pro-life people who have religious reasoning for making this decision. There are some secular people that will try to make this case, and they do exist. But overwhelmingly, the voices in this country have been that of religion, of religious voices. They have been religious voices in churches and religious voices in parts of our government that are espousing these religious beliefs when they should not. And that is the problem here that we're having with this decision. It was not done for a secular, this is, we really got to make sure the law's in place here. No. This has way different motivations involved in a case like this. And it is scary not only for women right now and for people with uteruses right now, but for other people in the future. And Jason, I want to hear, of course, more of your thoughts on this, but I have to mention this point as well, in that Justice Clarence Thomas specifically talked about in his opinion on pages 119 that you can check out, that he wants to revisit some other landmark cases for civil rights that he also thinks are suspect. And these cases are Griswold v. Connecticut, which is access for birth control for people outside of marriages and outside of prescriptions. This is Lawrence v. Texas, which was a decision to talk about in Texas. I don't know if you guys remember this. It used to be illegal to literally be gay in Texas. You could not have two consensual sex acts between men. It was illegal. State law said you could not do it. So decision of talking about that. And of course, the other decision he talked about, the other case he was talking about was Obergefell v. Hodges, which, if you recall, is the decision to allow same-sex marriage across every state in the country. It was allowed in some states, but not in others. This decision said this had to be made available for all states. He is explicitly saying that these rules, in his opinion, these rulings should be revisited in this case. And that is, quite frankly, incredibly terrifying, because nobody thought that this would happen. Nobody expected this. Nobody thought that like a decision like this could be overturned, but it did. So now what's next? Honestly, what can we expect from the Supreme Court to be done? It's very quite likely possible that these also cases in landmark civil liberty cases will be overturned. And that is really, really, really bad. Now, some of you who are outside the country might be wondering, what can you do about this?
Nothing.
In our system, how do we do anything? We can't. There is literally nothing we can do. The Supreme Court is not an elected position. We do not vote in this country for a Supreme Court. That is done by the president. The president gets to pick the Supreme Court justices. It might remind you that 5 of the Supreme Court justices that are currently on the court were picked by the unpopular presidents. In other words, the presidents that did not win the popular votes, including our last president, who picked 3 of the judges that are currently on the court and have lifetime appointments. So until they decide they want to resign or they die, that's it. There is no real way that this can be overturned in any other system, as far as I'm aware. People who are more expert in legal field can tell me otherwise. As far as I know, this is it.
It really is
the laws that we have to stick with.
It really is it, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she served until the day that she died, but Kennedy retired. So it's a lifetime appointment unless they don't want to. We were talking about this earlier, and Clarence Thomas has been on since 91.
91.
It's absolutely
over 30
disgusting.
years.
Yeah.
There are dictators that don't get appointments that long.
Well, usually those end in, bullet spread. So it's
sure.
That's a little different story.
I mean, it's often been commented on that the Supreme Court is actually the most powerful position in this country. You're being a justice.
It can be.
I mean, when it's not elected by the people, and it's not a choice that you or I get to make, and you get absolute ruling over laws in this country, it's an incredibly powerful position, right? But that's neither here nor there. What I want to do tonight, folks, is of course talk about whatever kinds of topics you want to talk about, but I want to make this a space for people to vent, a space for people to grieve, and a space for people to feel comfortable talking about their experiences and how this decision is affecting you. Because obviously this is very scary for pretty much everybody who cares, right? There's really not a lot we can do. And that's something that we just have to come to terms with. So, we're talking with some of the folks behind the scenes. We're going to see about what we can do in the future to kind of provide some more resources and talk about how we can help you guys best. Unfortunately, being in Texas, we've got it pretty bad here as well as far as our laws. But I do want to point out that on the Atheist Community of Austin's website, we do have an About page that does talk about our official policy and official positions on on choice, on being pro-choice. So that's really what I want to talk about tonight for this show. Again, anybody else who wants to call in about some other issues, we'd be happy to do it. But I wanted to make a special focus on this tonight. because this is life changing. Honestly, this is this will be seen, I think, as a blight in the American legal.
This is going to have such far-reaching effects for so long, and the worst part about it. So you talk about what we can and what we can't do, what the court can and can't do. You know, I've said, okay, well, there's the Brown versus Board of Education decision in order to have equal education. That could be on the table for all we know. Now, thankfully, things like Dred Scott can't really be on the table because of the 13th Amendment. We've got the 20th Amendment, which means women can still vote.
Right.
But we do have certain protections. And that's what's so disturbing, is that we've had this decision for 50 years and Congress has done nothing to codify it.
Yeah.
If it got codified into law and then into the Bill of Rights, then there would be nothing that they could do about it. But unfortunately, we done screwed up.
Yeah.
It's as pure and simple as that. We screwed up. We didn't push our leaderships. And then that's everybody in this country. We didn't push the leadership because, Roe v. Wade, it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's just gone.
It was a right taken for granted. And what Jason's talking about, again, just for international listeners, for those of you who understand, with our amendments to our Constitution, it's generally harder, if not impossible, to remove what those amendments do for the Constitution. I don't know if that's even, well, actually, it has been done before.
Once.
Once. And that was for prohibition, which is wild. But yeah, it used to be illegal to drink alcohol in this country, and they decided that wasn't a great idea. So that happened. But this wasn't put into an amendment. It was defended by an amendment, but then this decision has decided, no, this isn't actually protected under the Constitution. And that's how they're able to remove this. And that's how they're going to be able to remove these other cases that I mentioned before as well, because they were made off of similar rulings that Roe v. Wade was, which was based off of the interpretation of this particular amendment. So, like I said, there's real concern. I mean, I remember, Jason, when 45 was elected into office, and people were saying, oh, well, we should be concerned about rights for LGBT people, right? Like, that should be a thing. Like, you could take it away. And people were like,
there's a court decision.
No.
Yeah, court decision.
It's fine. It's a court
safe.
decision, whatever. And here we are. This is it. Because of those appointments, because those justices have an appointment, they have the ability to take that away. And not only do they have the ability to, at least one of them has the intention to, or at least has the recommendation to.
And that's just Thomas. We already know that Kavanaugh is not a fan of gay people. We already know that Barrett is a handmaid's tale. She's ready and willing to do everything that is God's decree, and ready to just make that part of our way of life.
Yeah. It's again, it's a very scary time. It's a very frightening time. This is a part of the show where I feel like I needed to do my research and figure out what exactly hopeful advice can I tell you? Can I tell you just need to vote? Can I tell you just need to campaign and convince people? But there's really not anything we can do at this time as a current citizen without resorting to recommendations that I can't make on a show like this. So it's just very, very scary. And we are here to at least talk to you about it. So if you have stories about how abortion has affected you, if you have stories or experiences that you want to share with us, if you want to talk to us about how you're feeling about this decision, we want to, again, make that available to you today. Another thing I wanted to talk about, the original thing I wanted to talk about with Jason this week, was another decision that the Supreme Court made this week, which was that schools in Maine were decided that, or specifically religious schools in Maine, could be funded by the state, which is a very, very obviously clear violation of the First Amendment and what we have, established as a separation of church and state, which is something that the ACA, of course, is very, very big on. We don't like that. Now, that decision makes things more complicated because some of those schools are the only schools that some of these kids can go to. And so because of that, you want to be able to give them the resources that they can to, get the best education that they can, which means funding religious schools, because the state has ultimately failed in giving the kids best education they could using public resources. And now private schools are becoming more and more of a thing in this country as well. That's like a separate issue that's kind of going on. But the Supreme Court making a lot of decisions this week that are affecting a lot of people's lives. So any thoughts on that, Jason, before we move on and get to some calls here?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's really in the nonprofits wheelhouse. We definitely talk a lot about news. We do a lot of analyses from a skeptical humanist perspective.
Yeah.
And I can already tell you, not this week, because this week's show has already been recorded, but next week that we are going to be talking about it, that it's not going to be talked about from the science perspective. It's not going to be talked about from the health perspective, because we already have a really good episode on that when this memo first leaked. We are going to be talking about it more from the religious agenda perspective and a little bit from the law perspective. So, we do definitely have that coming up. So, stay tuned for that, because there's going to be analysis, and hopefully in that episode, since we're not going to be going on the same thing that everyone else is going on, you'll have a little bit more of a better perspective apart from all the other talking heads.
Yeah. We obviously want to give you our perspective, of course, as atheists, because, that's how we feel about this issue, but also just as humanists as well, and how this is affecting everyone. And I'm looking forward to hearing that, but definitely check out the nonprofits next week with Jason on there.
I'm not going to be on that episode.
Oh, he's not going to be on that. Never mind.
No, but we do have a really good panel, which is still shaping up. I think we've got most of it taken care of, but
Great.
I'll probably be the one pushing the buttons in the back like I normally do for this show.
And that's what Jason normally does. Jason is usually the guy that yells at me when something goes wrong. And, he's always there in the crew cam with the Truth Wanted swag. So we appreciate you, Jason. We're glad that I'm glad that this is like your official call-in show debut. So really glad that you're here talking to us with this stuff. Jason, I want to go ahead and move on to the Patron of the Week. So we're going to get that out of the way and then talk to you guys about this and other things. So every single week, we always thank a patron. And those of you who want to donate, it is patreon.com/TW. There's also a link as well, tiny.cc link for that in the description. We want to thank everybody that donates to the show, but we especially want to thank at least one patron every single week by name. And this week's Patron of the Week is going to be waiting for it. It is, it's still going. It's coming. Well, as it's getting on the screen, I know who it is. It's Allegedly Dave. So thank you, Allegedly Dave, for allegedly donating for Truth Wanted. Allegedly Dave, you have a very similar name to my name, which is ObjectivelyDan. There's the name on screen. I feel like that's like, but I've seen your name around for a while. I think you were rocking the Allegedly Dave before I was doing the ObjectivelyDan thing. So I think you get the pass on that. But it's very weird to see another dude doing the whole adjective name situation, which is pretty hilarious. So thank you, Allegedly Dave, for donating on that link there. Again, it's tiny.cc/Patreon TW for that. Thank you to everybody who donates on Patreon. Jason, are you ready to talk to some people?
I talked to a couple of contentious calls the last time I was on. Hopefully we get some better, more honest interlocutors. Let's go into it.
Okay, let's see. So again, we want to talk to everybody tonight about whatever you want to talk about, but we do want to talk about this issue in particular as well. So first thing we're going to talk to John from Texas. John, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you just fine, John. What's going on?
Fantastic. So I'm only calling because I have some spare time. So this is going to be more off the top of my head. So my thoughts might not be as collected as it would be if I wanted to present my case better. But basically, sure. I saw that you were talking about abortion, obviously the Supreme Court ruling today. And I agree. Well, obviously there's a legal aspect and then there's a moral aspect, and you could categorize it in many different ways. I wanted to call today about the ramifications of like completely making it illegal or keeping it legal, and what I think those ramifications would be if we got it wrong on either side. So I would present it this way. So abortion is either something that, number one, prevents a human person's life coming into existence, or number two, ends a human person's life which is already in existence. So I would divide it that way. And then I would say this. If it's number one, if it's something that just prevents a human life coming into existence, then it's in principle exactly like a lot of the other forms of contraception which we have available. It may do it further down the line, but in principle it's just like one of those. So let's say it's something that just prevents human life coming into existence and we criminalize it, we don't allow people access to it, then the worst consequence of it is what people have lost one form of birth control. That's literally what the consequence would be, from many available forms. Okay, so, but if it's number two, it's something that ends a human life already existent and we don't make it illegal, then we have the consequences, the continued genocide of human babies. So just looking at it from a epistemic 50-50, if you didn't know which it was, the consequence of getting it wrong on one side is much weightier than getting it wrong on the other side. And then I could give you three reasons why I think we should end it if it's number two. That is, it ends a human life.
Let's stop for a second there, John, because I do have a question. You want to give it an either or, a one or two, but my question is, what if it's a third option, that an abortion is the termination of a pregnancy? You're trying to assign, life or death on something, but the abortion is simply the termination of a pregnancy. Also, you're trying to set up a dichotomy here where there is a whole bunch more of nuance. So let's go ahead and throw those two out completely and focus on the termination of a pregnancy and whether or not that is good.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that, but I would say that what you've said doesn't really make sense. It's based on the logical law of excluded middle. So if you count a pregnancy as a human life, then it would be number two. If you don't count a pregnancy as a human life, then it would be number one, because you would obviously assume a pregnancy leads to a human life. So you don't believe a pregnancy leads to a human life?
A pregnancy can lead to a human life, but when you're at 6 weeks, a mass of cells is not a human life. Even when you have just a heartbeat, that is not, early term abortions is not aborting a human life. It is terminating a pregnancy. And late term abortions is giving birth and letting the whatever is left, however much development it can do, see if it can come to term or not. And if it's before the, is viable, then no, it does in fact die. So again, we're at the point where we are terminating a pregnancy. The question of personhood is not something that you can just say, oh, well, it's a person at this stage, because you don't even get a social security number until you're born if you're in the United States.
Okay, well, there are arguments for whether the pregnancy is a human, but all you're telling me there is that you just believe it's something that prevents a human life coming into existence. That's what abortion would be. You're telling me you don't think it's something that ends a human life already in existence. Now, my point is, let's say you're correct and we ban it anyway, then what have we lost? We've lost one form of birth control. In principle, that's all you're doing. You what the other forms do, which is prevent a human life coming into existence. And I don't think the consequence is very big. We have many medical procedures we don't just have availability to just because we want them. And so that's the consequence if we get it wrong. Now, that's assuming what you would say is right, that it's not a human life or existence. But if it is a human life or existence and we get it wrong, then it's the continued genocide of human babies, human persons, as we'd put it. So to me, the consequence is much weightier. If we were epistemic 50-50, now you might argue epistemically you believe that it's not a human life. That's a separate argument. I'm just making the argument of the consequences if we get it wrong one way or the other.
Yes, I think, John, I think this is how evangelicals, Catholics, and other Christian denominations view this issue, right? They're seeing it as, well, it is a human life, regardless. Depending on which denomination you talk to, it's a human life straight from conception, and because of this is why it is a sin. This is why it is a grave moral issue. And if that were true, if I were to believe that to be true, that it is a human life and that it is worth protecting at that stage, then I would agree with you with the premise that, yes, you are ultimately terminating the human life. However, I just don't. I don't agree with the premise that it is. I don't think it's 6 weeks it is. And as Jason's pointing out, a viability outside the womb is the fact that we consider here. We have to people talk about heartbeats and people talk about brain stems, but ultimately we don't have an objective definition to figure out what it means to be a human or a person. What I really care about in this is their suffering that's being caused. And based on my understanding of medical science and based on what I believe to be other people's understanding of medical science, when that procedure is happening, and that typically happens, it is within the first trimester, that there is not suffering that is occurring. That, in other words, a human life is not, suffering from the consequence of that decision. So if there isn't a human life suffering from the consequence of that decision, which is my understanding, then there is no moral crisis to be had here in that sense, right? Obviously, people who have religious arguments who say, well, there's a soul in there and there's something that's feeling, it has a heartbeat, it has these other things, they are going to disagree. And unfortunately, that's just not something I can work with, because I can't work with a religious argument that says one way or the other. But even in a secular sense, I don't think it has to be, as Jason pointed out, an epistemic 50-50. I understand where it can be that way, but I don't think it has to be.
Well, and my next, John, I do have one additional question, because Dan brought up suffering, and I'm sure you're gonna bring up how the fetus, the unborn child, the zygote, whatever, the soul, as it were. I don't know exactly where your definition of life actually lies, but there is more than just the suffering of the developing series of cells. There's also the suffering of the mother herself, or the uterus owner themselves.
You call her the mother. You call her the mother, which assumes that that's a human baby then.
Well, okay. Assume it's a human baby. You can call it cow mother. No. You can call it cow mother. Cow mother doesn't mean it's a human baby. That's just semantics. I don't agree with that.
Okay, so let's drop the semantics. Let's also drop the super hyperbolic language of genocide, because we will get absolutely nowhere if we are doing that. Now, I will, for the sake of this, I will walk back the term mother and say the pregnant person, okay? And again, I'm going to use pregnant person so that we don't exclude any other uterus owners.
Yeah.
So, why are we completely ignoring the well-being of the pregnant person? Because a pregnant person, we don't know their situation. We don't know if there is a medical reason, because you have not addressed that at all. We haven't addressed, in the cases of rape and incest, you've got so much nuance in there that you are choosing to ignore. And one of the things I would really like to know is why? Why do you want to ignore the nuance and just say, no, straight, this is life, this is happening? Because there's so much more in that. With this and with all the other trigger laws that are going into effect, they say that it's not going to be used in the cases of entropic pregnancies, where the embryo forms outside of the uterus. But we don't actually know if that's true, because if you make abortion illegal across the board, but you've got this little carve out, but do you actually have this carve out? Who's to say that it won't then fill in that gap and go, you know what, entropic pregnancy, just let that pregnant person die.
Yeah.
So can you address those issues?
Yeah, I can. You say I'm ignoring the nuance. You have to be fair here. I'm calling with one point, and that's the consequence of what would happen if we get it wrong on either side. I'm not calling to give every single possible scenario and all these things, but in terms of
why not?
Why
not?
Because I was told.
Why can't you do that? Why can't you go on other side? Why can't you figure out the full picture?
Well,
don't take one little snapshot. No. Don't take one little snapshot and say that this is how things are going to be, and that's that.
Yeah, but I have answers. I just got told by the person who takes the call to keep it to one subject, so I'm just calling about one thing. But I can answer you. So what specific you want to know? Specifically what my thoughts would be on if we should ban abortion for like a medical reason, if it's going to endanger the life of the mother. Is that correct?
That's one really good place to start. But, again, let's use pregnant person, not mother.
Oh, okay. So I would say this. I would say my personal position is obviously I would see the baby in the womb as a child and
wrong.
I don't know. You say
not baby yet.
Not child. Let's say human person. So I see the
mistake number 2. Not human yet.
Okay. Well. Okay. I'm saying based on that as a premise.
It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard, and that's where we run into the problem. We run into the problem because this is such a hard subject for. Just saying either or, black and white, right and wrong. There's so much more nuance, and that's what I'm trying to get you to see, is that there's more nuance here than you are giving credit for.
No, I feel you haven't let me answer. That's the issue. It's not that, it's the nuance. So if there was let's say the child, well, okay, it's because you're not, my normal nomenclature, as you would say, is to say child. The pregnancy in the mother's stomach, in the lady's stomach or whatever, is a human person. Let's just assume that, and let's say that puts her life at risk, and then I would definitely be, a doctor has to look at and weigh the pros and cons. I would be on the side of obviously it'd be far better if one life survives rather than 2 lives die. But I would say there's a big difference between killing a person and letting people die naturally. I would say there's a big difference there. But if you can prevent 2 people dying naturally, and he has to do something like, and I won't say you try and kill the baby. Obviously, you can try and deliver the baby early and save the baby. But there's no reason, especially after 20 weeks, that you just kill the baby. You just deliver the baby early, if that's the issue. But I haven't got a problem with people who have to make these hard decisions, as long as one of the factors they do when they make these hard decisions is they look at the pregnancy as a human person, as in the equation. If they don't look at it as in the equation, if they come to a different conclusion, that's fine. But if they see it as a human person as part of the equation, then that's all I'm asking for. But my original
doctors are not even being given the choice in a lot of these laws.
Go ahead, John.
Doctors are not even being given the choice. So,
yeah, keep going.
Sorry, the 2 people speaking, so I'm not quite sure what you're asking me to say. What was the question?
Well, it sounded like you had another point to say. If you didn't, that's fine. But just to kind of put at least get going with this conversation here is that I understand what you're trying to say, which is that if we have to consider if it's a human person, if it's a human person, then we have to respect its rights, its desires, it's what it would want, etc. I think the issue that I would have, and what Jason has expressed, is that that terminology, even of itself, may not actually describe what we're talking about here. I wouldn't call an embryo a human person. I don't think it has needs. I don't think it has wants. From an evolutionary perspective, it doesn't make sense for it to even have a capacity to suffer and experience pain or to experience desires when it's in that state. at least that early on, right? Like, yeah, I think like if we're talking about a baby that's a week before it's due, yeah, I think that's probably close enough to a baby where you're like, yeah, absolutely, we can get that because we have evidence that shows like, yeah, we can get babies, and at that point it is a baby, out from the earlier parts of a pregnancy, it can survive outside of the womb. But that early on, if we're talking about where statistically most abortions happen, which is within the first and sometimes second trimester, I don't think there's a problem there. I don't think we actually have to consider it a human and consider its wants or desires. That I just don't believe that the evidence is there for that. So I mean that's how I would summarize my response there, John.
Okay. Can I respond, or do you want to go to the next caller?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll let you respond, and then we'll probably wrap it up after that.
Yeah, okay. So I'll keep it brief. So basically, that argument is whether it's a human person or not. And if you remember, my initial thing was the consequence. So if abortion is something either prevents a human person coming into existence or it ends a human person's life already in existence. And like I say, what are the worst consequences? We lose one form of contraception if we ban it. I don't feel that's a big consequence if we ban it on wrong terms. And you say there's no evidence to believe it's a human person. Well, I would say there's no real strong evidence to believe it's not. And I think it does come down to what we would say in epistemology is non-inferential belief-forming mechanisms, which is just seemings. And we're not going to get to whether it's a human person or not just by inference. It's going to be something non-inferential. And so don't you think, in one sense, better that the states, the small communities decide among themselves, because it is a moral issue and we don't agree.
But
no.
Here's the thing, John.
No.
I don't decide. Wait, John. I don't decide whether something lives or not because it's human. That's not. First of all, I'm a vegan. Okay, I want animal lives to live. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't do it because they're human. I do it because they have a capacity for suffering, and arguably for some animals, a capacity for reasoning on some level, but a capacity to suffering is really my main concern. It's not because they're human. It really isn't. I think that's not a good criteria. I don't think you're going to get an objective metric. I do agree we have to, you're talking about theming, right? And I think you do have to point out some of those themes of what makes life what makes a life a life and what makes that existence meaningful and worth protecting. And my criteria is suffering. That's what I've chosen to choose, because if you don't have a capacity to suffering, I don't think there's harm that's being done there, right? But anyway, John, I do appreciate you calling in. We do have some other callers that we definitely want to talk to you tonight. But thanks so much for doing that. Jason, you looked like you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah. The evidence where he's talking about there's no evidence that
right. I didn't address that.
Is,
but yeah.
Yeah, there actually is. The fact that there is no central nervous system after before a certain point. The fact that you don't have a heartbeat before a certain point. That is not a human. That is not when you are so early in development, your evidence is there. That and we have seen it where people will put up pictures of different species of animals in different states of development, and some people would be like, "Oh, it's so terrible that they took that human baby out and aborted it." It's like, excuse me, that's actually a dolphin. That malformed or an unformed, it's a dolphin. It's not actually a human being in any way, shape, or form. No matter how you spin it, it's a completely different species. So you can't even identify. If you can't even identify it, you're done.
Yeah, a criteria for just being a human being isn't enough for me, right? Because like I would want to save my cat whenever I can, like in its interests, and it's not a human, right? And like most people would want to save their animals that they consider pets or friends, right? Like that's if we base it on other things that we have to consider the interests of, and the interests of an embryo are, in my opinion, are non-existent. It hasn't been demonstrated that it has interests. It hasn't been demonstrated that at that stage that there's something that we need to worry about. And the fact is, from an evolutionary perspective, again, it just doesn't make sense when you talk about how natural abortion really is. Really, when we're talking about abortion, we're talking about medically assisted abortions, because most conceptions don't even happen. Most conceptions don't even go to term. So if my understanding, it's about 10% of all conceptions actually go to term, right? So it's like that doesn't make sense from an evolutionary perspective to have a being that can have suffering at that stage. And for all intents and purposes, it doesn't seem that we have evidence to suggest that it does. And that's what I really care about. I don't actually care that it's human. That's kind of a red herring for me. But anyway.
We've also seen where people have gotten jail time for miscarrying because of drug use. Now, that's terrible in itself, but is it possible then, with all these laws, with all this morality that's going around, that every miscarriage will be investigated like a murder? Right. And how absolutely abhorrent that is, because first, the pregnant person, because we're going to go with that right now, the pregnant person has to go through such tremendous loss, plus they have to go through an investigation, an invasive investigation, a murder investigation. That may sound a little bit hyperbolic to some people, and I get that. I do get that. However, it's not outside the realm of possibility, because we didn't think the overturning of Roe v. Wade was possible. Yeah,
I think to John's point, he would probably say that, he probably isn't interested in that. I think he would be interested in investigating the interpretations of what happens when something is done intentionally, again, when it is like medically assisted. But he's not here to talk about himself, so I won't argue for it. But right now, we really do got to move on, because there's a lot of other people who want to talk to us. Before we do that, first, I just want to show a quick promo of some of the other shows that are happening here at the ACA, and give us maybe some brevity, maybe some lightness, I hope. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Monogamy is not healthy for them, or doesn't feel good to them, or doesn't work for them. Is that also possible?
Yeah, the old joke is that a sex addict is just anybody who has more sex than their therapist.
Well, philosophically, you have arbitrarily chosen to believe something, believe in a Christianity, we'll say, and you think that that's superior, but you don't have any actual evidence, any actual basis to think that that's a superior moral system, do you?
How many times have we had callers call in and say, oh, I'm the only one in such and such a town that's an atheist, and then the host says, oh, have you tried these 3 atheist organizations that are just down the street from you? I mean, you feel like you're alone, but we're all alone together.
There's another option, which would be to go, if there's not evidence for the God, and we can't explain how we could tell the difference between God and our imagination, maybe you don't believe in the God. Maybe you just go, I don't know.
Popularity said that, we don't have proof for God. I have proof that people exist. So I would like to know, what is 100% proof that people exist?
Are you going to go into solipsism? Because we definitely don't have enough time for that. You realize that, right?
All right, and we are back, and we are taking some more calls here tonight on Truth Wanted. Next person that we're going to talk to is Kaylen, who is calling in from Japan. I think this is the first time we've ever had a call from Japan. Kaylen, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Awesome. Hey, Dan. Hey, Jason. I actually want to talk about I'm a theist. I actually wanted to talk about something I don't hear a lot of people using to defend against a lot of these, what I would say are politically charged arguments. The idea that the actual enforcing through government means Christian value. I don't think that's actually defendable in the Bible at all. I think it's something that is clearly political. It's not actually something you could find in the life of Jesus. You could find in the teachings after Jesus. I honestly think that if more people would call people out and say, please defend your value being subjected to everyone who doesn't subscribe to your religion, that people could not come up with biblical reasoning for that.
I agree.
Yeah. So the thing so we could talk about, why this is even a political issue, because pretty much before the 1960s, it wasn't. There was basically, to make a long story short, the evangelicals in this country figured out that they could ally with the Catholics in this country by making this a wedge issue, and it has now become the issue that it was. But yeah, I mean, historically, Christians have not really talked about this issue for the long haul. Now, your argument is interesting, but let me raise a counterpoint here, because what if I was a Christian that would say, like, well, if you listen to Paul in Romans 13, which talks about, you have to follow the law of the land. Well, what's that verse go? It basically, you know what I'm talking about. It's the verse that, like, lots of people that like fascist adjacent people will say, well, you have to listen to this crazy law because it's the law of the land, and you have to like it's that verse that talks about the authorities that are on earth were put there by God, and therefore you have to obey them. I mean, that is the line that Christians will use, right?
That is true, but at that same point, they are taking that perspective and then therefore becoming the enforcers. They are making the laws. In that sense, I think that's where people are off base. You don't have, there's no Christian perspective that could then say, I'll make this a law for everyone. You are then the authority. And there's no biblical basis for being that kind of authority. If someone in the church like had an abortion, the church isn't going to grab that person and subject them to a trial. Like they're going, the thing they're doing now is they're calling the authorities and getting an authority outside of the church to do that for them.
It also depends on where they are in the church. It's all subjective, because we have definitely seen, not specifically, the church as an entire institution, but we have seen, smaller churches make up their own rules for their own people. It's one of the reasons why we've had the cover-ups that we have in the Catholic Church. The rules are only rules for people who are not in the know. Religion is very cliquey.
Yeah. So, like, this is interesting because let's do a quick Bible lesson here, Kaylen. I know you know this. It's just explanation for the audience, but you're probably familiar with the Book of Judges and the Book of Kings, right? Yeah. And the whole thing with the judges is God is supposed to have chosen these people to lead and be the authority over these people, and eventually these people are like, no, we want to be like other nations and have kings. And and that is where supposedly they have this fall. And it's so funny because they'll talk about number 45 and we'll say, he's like David, but David has his flaws, right? But there wasn't supposed to be a David in the first place. They weren't supposed to be kings of the nation because there was supposed to be a direct through line to God. That's what these judges were. They were like minimalist systems of leadership to kind of like enforce those rules. Obviously, I don't want to live in a system of judges, but it is interesting to see because, like, the Bible doesn't really have a support for systems of democracy. It really doesn't. The Bible does not care about the individual opinions of people and say, oh, we should vote and think about it. No. It's all about whatever God wants. I mean, that's a pretty clear theme throughout the entire book. And how that's enforced and how that's interpreted is always going to be the point of contention, isn't it, Kaylen? Like, it's always going to be like an issue, I think, in the Christian church, which is interesting.
I agree. And I think especially it's important to get people to go back to why they're doing it. And if they can't give a biblical reason, it's political. If someone told me so. And I think in that, I think it's easy to call them disingenuous. I mean, it's also easy. There's the double standard, especially in America, in the Republican Party, where if you come into my house and I have a gun, it's self-defense for me to shoot you. And then bare minimum, why isn't the same courtesy given to a woman in distress who is fearing for their life? Even if you consider that a full life, self-defense isn't even talked about in that.
Well, it's even worse than that. It's even worse than that, because in the Bible, it says that if a woman is screaming in the field, but nobody hears her, it's somehow not rape.
Yeah.
So,
it gets, Old Testament. Well, some Old Testament laws that govern the Jewish people, which many Christians say should be applied today. I mean, but I think about this. You want to take a strictly Christian perspective? You don't want to take a Jewish perspective on this? Okay. look at the death penalty in this country, right? Supposedly we have this idea that anybody can be saved and have their life turned around, and literally had a dude who died on the cross, was executed by the state, like not just unlawfully, but also morally wrong according to the Christian perspective, right? It was wrong to do that, and yet there are many Christians in this country, particularly in the Catholic Church, but in other denominations as well, who will say, yeah, no, death penalty, yeah, like that's definitely a thing, like that should happen, which is like weird. It's crazy. Like, what the heck? Isn't that kind of the whole point of why this religion started? Was because a guy was like executed by the state wrongfully, and now we like are totally doing it. Yeah, I agree. It's double standards, but Kaylen, like religion, and this isn't exclusive to Christianity, just religion and politics will always be interconnected. I don't think you can ever separate that. I think your religious perspective is going to inform your political perspective, and obviously vice versa, right? But like how your view of the world and interpretation of the divine and the supernatural, or your tenets and what you keep to and your ideology, is going to affect what you think is going to be the most effective government, and also how you think other people should live their lives. So, what can you do?
It's very true. There's a lot. I think a lot of the problem too is with the leaders of a country putting things on a ballot that aren't meant to be what do you think should be done for the country, but it's what do you personally believe about this subject? And it's a disingenuous question on a lot of ballots where people are not being asked, how do you think the country should be run for everyone? It's what do you personally believe about this specific thing? And then in that sense, they're not even talking about this will be enforced to everyone who doesn't agree with you.
Yep.
And I feel like the whole system is being manipulated for that reason. And in that sense, I don't think Christian leaders in that sense should be allowed in a lot of ways. Because
that's interesting.
Manipulation for people's ideology personalized, but then weaponized against everyone who doesn't agree with them.
What's also interesting is that democracy is actually a pretty new conception, comparatively speaking.
Sure.
And when you say, "Oh, these are not kings," and that's how it was supposed to be back in the day. And so, if this were truly a Christian nation, as some people want to point out, then we wouldn't have had George Washington the president. We would have had George Washington the king. But the theist that George Washington even was said, no, we are done with kings. We are done with this type of idea that, one person is completely infallible, because King George was, well, basically a loon.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, Kaylen, any other thoughts that you want to add on this particular topic? If not, I want to go ahead and talk to some other people, because we got a lot of people who want to talk to us tonight.
Oh, yeah. I just really wanted to raise that. I think that's something that isn't talked about with Christians. Just like, give me the jurisdiction for why in the Bible you think you should make everyone else do it. One other thing, I think I was given a really good example of how a Christian should behave with these beliefs. My mom worked as like a crisis hotline center, basically for like 5-10 years. And all she would do is just take calls from people who were kind of worried about a procedure. And she would just talk about both of them, talk about both options. And it was just talking to the person who was going through the situation, not enforcing any judgment on them, not enforcing any like circumstantial evidence, just giving them more options if they were afraid of something. And I think that is what Christians should be doing if they believe, if that's what they want to do. I think that's what they should be doing, helping the people who are actually in the situation instead of trying to get the government to enforce it on them.
Well, I appreciate that perspective, Kaylen. Thank you. Thanks again, Will, for calling in on that. I will say, though, as I'm ending this call, that I don't know about pregnancy crisis lines or hotlines. If that's what they know that they're getting into, that's fine. But pregnancy crisis centers are definitely a problem. And I don't know if this was a place that your mother worked at or whatever, but I will say this, okay? Pregnancy crisis centers are not what I would think is ideal for Christians, because pregnancy crisis centers, for those of you who live outside the United States and might be wondering what the hell is that, well, it's these centers that are set up to look like Planned Parenthood clinics, to look like places where abortions can happen, but you don't actually get an abortion there. You get somebody who, as Kaylen was talking about, talks to you, and your mileage may vary. They may just talk to you about more options that you have, or they'll talk to you about the gospel. I mean, I've heard various things about these things. I mean, if it was truly a place where people talk to you about more options, that's fine, but a lot of these places are set up with the intention to deceive people into getting proper care. And that is not something I can support at all. Pretty much anything. If you want to get information, there's better ways to do that, right? Like Planned Parenthood clinics will give you information. It's not like they're going to be like, oh, you're ready to get this done, and not tell you anything about what's going on, you know? But anyway, thoughts on that call, Jason?
No, it's a whole lot better call than our first one. Something that, we largely agree with.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's interesting that he said that some Christians shouldn't be in positions of leadership. Like Jesus, my interpretation of Jesus, my interpretation of the gospel text was that he was an apocalyptic preacher. I don't think he actually anticipated that there would be a world like after he was gone, at least for much longer, at least while he was alive. It didn't seem like that his early followers interpreted that way either, according to the Gospels, which is why you have these weird things going on in some of the language that talks about, oh, well, they actually mean like, you won't die spiritually instead of you won't die physically, because there's literally some lines in there that says that you will live forever, and some other stuff in there. So I don't think Jesus had any ideas of how to set up a functioning government for people. I don't think that was like really his intention. But it is interesting that Christians will interpret that regardless. But anyway, we have some other callers that we should definitely talk to. So let's talk to some more people. Oh man, we got some interesting calls. Let's talk to Red. Red is calling in from Ohio. Red, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello. I just wanted to kind of talk about what we've all been talking about tonight. I kind of wanted to go into the mentality state that this decision is causing for a lot of people. I know it's easy to say, oh, just go to a therapist. I'm in a very privileged position to be able to go to a therapist. Not everybody can go to a therapist because of maybe financial issues, or it's not safe in their current home. And also, where do we even go from here? How do we fix this? Because right now it kind of seems a bit impossible of what we can do with where the Supreme Court is at right now. Because those Supreme Court justices there are there for life. So how do we fix this?
Yeah, and
it's really difficult to say how you fix this. How do you fix a lifetime appointment other than saying, okay, instead of that, let's do different types of appointments. Let's do term limits. But you would have to fundamentally change the court, and right now there's no incentive for anybody to do that. Like, we should have more justices. We should have justices that represent the different courts of appeals that we have across the country. We should have like 13 justices, and yet we only have 9.
Yeah. When there was, I remember during the Obama presidency, there was talks of expanding the court to 12 justices instead of 9. I don't think that went through. So like, it would have to be something like that. I mean, honestly, which is very doomer, right? It's not a happy outlook. Like when we talk about climate change, like every time we talk about it, it always gets worse and worse. But there's always like that little bit of hope that things can change. To be completely honest with you, Red, I don't know that there is a glimmer of hope for this situation. It doesn't seem, with the current system that we have in place, that any changes will be made unless drastic changes are made by the decision makers, that is the Supreme Court, in reversing this decision. And it has to be by the people who are currently in power, or a restructuring of how that system works, which who knows if that will ever happen. It's not even on the table right now. And that's really scary. And I hate to be that person that says that bad news, that says there's nothing we can do, but this isn't an issue where we can just vote on. This isn't something we could say, oh, well, maybe just next time.
Yeah.
Unless something drastic happens and something inexplicable and unplanned happens to the current Supreme Court justices, we are stuck with this ruling. And that is the really scary thing. The other thing we can do is to change state laws. Right? Because if we're in this free-for-all zone now of changing state laws, that's the next thing. I don't know if it can be done. And maybe that's the route.
Yeah.
Maybe figuring out how to do it. But with, at least in the state of Texas, not happening. Not happening with our current leadership.
Oh, definitely.
And
the scary thing is I'm actually moving down there in 3 months.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm with you, Red, too. I'm in a privileged position where I hope I don't have to be in a situation where my partner has to have a procedure done in a clinic like that. Like, I don't think I want to be able to use birth control to be able to prevent something like that as much as possible. But it could happen. Like, there's a reason why they call it unplanned pregnancies, right? Because they're unplanned. Like, it happens. And the options are really bleak. They're really bleak for at least people in the state of Texas right now. Again, if you're in East Texas, you have to drive all the way to New Mexico. And don't get me started on people who live in states that are next to us that have to drive possibly even farther right now. And that might change too. New Mexico might be changing its laws to stop it from abortion being as readily available there. So it sucks. It really does suck, Red.
It does. It's this and a lot of other things that are going on in my personal life has really been affecting me today.
Yeah.
I'm going to be moving to the deep south of Texas. So if I come in the position where I need an abortion, I have to take a plane. There's no other option because driving is just going to be too much of a hassle, really. The one bright side I do think about it is that me and my boyfriend do plan on moving to a protected state, but I can't help but feel for the people who are not in the position I am to be able to get birth control because of maybe family members might threaten them or it's too much of a dangerous situation. Because I understand that. I used to be in that situation, and it's incredibly sad, and I really feel for people who may not be in a privileged situation that I am. Even though this is affecting all women, I still feel like I have a little bit more privilege than most other women. But it's not an easy topic where there's not really a plan really right now on what to do. I guess right now, like what you said, is go to the state levels, because I guess right now we just have to choose our battles, because obviously going to the Supreme Court isn't going to help us. And they're not here for the people.
Let's say, Red, that a Hail Mary is thrown and that some radical changes happen in the state of Texas. Okay, great. That's just Texas, right? Like, that is not protecting the rights of people everywhere across the country. And that is the biggest problem with this thing, right? It's like, yeah, you could even do stuff on a local level and really try to make stuff work, and it could still not be given to everybody. I mean, like, God, like, it was only just a couple years ago where people had to go to the right state just to get married to their loved ones. And we might have to be in a situation like that again, too. Like, the states' rights stuff, I'm sorry, guys, it's fucking bullshit. It's fucking bullshit because we do not protect the individual liberties of every United States citizen or non-citizens living in this country when we should be, right? All this isn't states' rights. This is just states being able to take away people's rights. That's all this is. It's not giving rights to anybody. It's just the ability to take it away. We had rights for everybody. It's now the states that are taking it away. It's really frustrating, Red. And I hope that you're able to find some solace, in talking about this, because you did mention mental health, right? Like, I'm furious today. If in case you can't tell, I'm fucking pissed, and I'm gonna be pissed for a little while. I don't know when this is gonna go away. It's not good.
I'm purposely not talking to my parents because I know if they mentioned anything about abortion, because they're all very pro-life. If I'm purposely not talking to any of them right now, because if they brought up anything about abortion, I don't think I could physically shut up because they don't know I'm pro-choice.
That can be difficult. And when you talk about, oh, this is a states' rights thing, I've seen it where there's talk about punishing potential pregnant people who get an abortion, punishing them if they do go out of state.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, but that has massive echoes. That has massive echoes of the the late 1800s, where southern states wanted to get their, for lack of a better term, property back.
Yeah. And
so they were willing to go into other states, go into other areas, and the other states and areas was like, no, you can't come in here. And I hate to say that, that means we're up to a civil war, because that gets into hyperbolic territory very quickly. But there are such echoes.
The Fugitive Slave Act.
Yeah.
It's what they're talking about right now. I think I heard about it in the state of Missouri, where they'd like to create a law that would be convicting someone of conspiracy to commit abortion. So in other words, if you're in Missouri and you go to a state like California or somewhere where you can get an abortion, you would be tried in the state of Missouri for conspiracy to commit abortion if they have evidence that would suggest that you are making these plans to do that. So they could even when some of the states can still do it, there's talks about trying to criminalize and punish people for making these acts. So it's really not great, Red. It's really not great. And I wish I could say everything's going to be okay and we're going to figure this out. There's no real solutions right now that I can think of. People smarter than me maybe can figure something out. People more familiar with the legal system, but for right now, it seems pretty bleak. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. What can I do? I'm just a guy who talks in front of a microphone.
It's all mostly just talk right now, and talking does help. It's not going to change anything for now, but it does help people like me and maybe people in other positions, other women, to talk about this stuff, because it's important. Because if we just sit around and not talk about it, who is going to talk about it? And if we're not talking about it, then nobody's going to get anything done about it.
And I would say that we're talking about it. There's definitely plenty of secular, avenues out there. I mean, obviously we got our fan run stuff, but there's also, recovering from religion. They've got their operators standing by if you need, further help. There's the Secular Therapy Project. So there are avenues out there, even if it is just to talk.
Red, I hope if I can do anything for you today and other people who are listening or watching to this, is that I can be the angry voice that's voicing all the thoughts in your head right now and putting them into words for you. Because some people, that's a kind of therapy for some people. and I hope I can at least do that, But anyway, thanks so much.
Red's doing a pretty good job on her own.
I'm appreciative of it.
I thank you, Red, and thanks again for your call, and thank you for expressing your concerns as well. What can I say, Jason? What the fuck can I say? It sucks. It sucks.
It does. And we are looking at a terrible snapshot in history, and hopefully we can get through this. The American people are nothing if optimistic, and I gotta think that, okay, we are in a very bad place. We've been in bad places before, and we've overcome. Whether it's a grassroots level saying, no, we're going to ferry people over to states where they can get an abortion, whether it's, we will overcome this. I have to believe that. And it's one of those things like, oh, are you taking that on faith? A little bit, unfortunately.
I want to believe in the Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just yes, it's a little bit of a leap of faith, but we have gotten through some of the darkest times in American history, and hopefully this is just one of those pages that becomes a footnote and we move on to better things. That's what I got to hope for.
Martin Luther King Jr. has a quote that I actually don't like. This wasn't from him. He popularized it from another writer, but it's something like the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think his phrasing in that is that, yes, there's trials and tribulations, but eventually human beings overcome. When I hear that, I don't think that's true all the time, because empires have risen and fallen. People have died for no good reason. And, civilizations have crumbled and life has changed, but life does go on. People do move on. And I can at least say that much, right? I can't promise you that everything is going to be fixed in a year or 5 years or 10 years or even in our lifetimes. But we do have to hold on to something to make sure that we can just live our days. All I can say is, as far as legal avenues, it's very disheartening. Very disheartening.
It is.
But we have some other people that want to talk.
But the United States did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Jason. Let's go ahead and try to talk to some other people. I want to try to talk
to
everybody who's called. We got a little bit of a delay going on, but that's okay. We're rocking it through. We've got some people who want to talk to us, and I want to try to get to everybody tonight if we can. Hopefully we go a little bit longer than usual, and that is okay, because today is a day where just want to talk to you guys, see how you're feeling, and see what's going on. But this is going to be, I think, a different call. This is Ricardo, who's calling in from Italy. I don't think we've had a call from Italy either. Ricardo, you've been waiting on the line for a while now. Thanks so much for your patience on that. How are you doing, Ricardo? You are live on Truth Wanted.
Oh, thank you. So, hi, Dan. Hi, Jason. So, first of all, I want to say that I'm really sorry for what's going on in your country.
Thank you.
That's mind-blowing. But that is that may be part of what I want to talk about with you about. So I basically have a problem. Each time that I have a conversation with a religious person and going to a Catholic school, that may happen quite a lot. And it might get a little difficult. So, for example, abortion, or let's say gay marriage, that's something I talk a little bit more about. So I clearly, the position of the person I'm talking to is rooted in religion. But if I don't want to be the one that tries to de-evangelize that person. That's not. I wouldn't appreciate if someone tried to evangelize me. So I'm not going to do the contrary. I don't care what you believe, as long as it doesn't affect negatively other people. So the first thing to do, I think, it would be to find a way to talk about that without trying to avoid an attack, and the direct attack on their beliefs.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to.
Well, so Ricardo, I'm glad you asked this. This is a very, I'm sure you've seen this show before, but this is a very common question, which I could summarize as, how do I talk to people about these things, about these beliefs that people have? The first question I always ask, and I would be interested in knowing your answer on this, Ricardo, but for rhetorical purposes, I'll just repeat here, is why do you want to do this? Why do you feel the need to talk to them? I think that's important to figure out. Seriously, it's important to figure out. Jason's laughing, but it's true.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we
you're absolutely right.
We have to make sure that we're doing this for the right reasons, right? I can't go out to a church camp and say, sorry, guys, God's not real. Go home. Get the fuck out of here. No way. It's just not going to happen. So you got to figure out, okay, what's important here? So like for this current conversation that we're talking about with the Supreme Court decision, we're talking about abortion issues. When people are going to make religious arguments, I don't have to necessarily go a deep dive and figure out, do we have to believe this because you believe that it's God? We just have to figure out people's individual reasons. You'll find that everybody believes for different reasons, and that everybody has sometimes not great reasons to believe, but sometimes people have beliefs and they don't even know why they have them because nobody's bothered to have a conversation with them to examine those beliefs. So, I would point you, Ricardo, to stuff that we've talked about a lot on this show, which is a method of street epistemology, which is talking to people. It is an organized, semi-organized methodology on how to talk to people, and I don't have time to explain it to you here. I'm sorry. I wish I could, but the short of it is asking 3 different types of questions. First is those what questions, figuring out what that belief is, defining it, then asking about those why questions, why people believe in these beliefs. And if you get to the root of it, then you start asking some of those how questions, which is how could we test if this belief is true? How can we figure out if this belief accurately describes reality, or if that person is even interested in having beliefs that accurately describe reality? Because some people aren't. Some people just want to believe stuff because they like it for whatever reason. And you will find that you will have some success with talking to people if you follow this method. It's what I use. I don't use it for every single call on here, obviously, but I do use it, and I think it is an effective way to talk to people without putting in your personal biases into these conversations, right? Without alienating people with thinking, oh, you just want to talk to me because you're an atheist and you want to try to convince me that quote unquote atheism is true or whatever, so yeah, that's a lot of words there for me. Jason, any thoughts?
No, I mean, that's absolutely great. And I personally do like street epistemology. I've practiced it to some extent. However, I'm no expert in it by any stretch of the imagination. My wife and I, before the pandemic, I practiced on a couple, I think they were Jehovah's Witnesses. But as far as, we can't really give explicit advice because, that's not the scope of the show and all that. But I would say that, what's worked for me in conversations with my dad, because my dad is a theist who actually helped me get out of theism by some of the nerdy stuff that he introduced me to. I would say that, setting boundaries with him really, really helped. It's like, okay, look, we can talk about this. We can talk about politics. We can talk, but we cannot go into the religious aspect. The last time that he ever talked to me about religion was several years ago. And it was basically him saying that he believed that the book of Revelations is true and that somehow it'll get there. And I told him, it's like, look, I appreciate your beliefs. I do. They are not my beliefs. And I don't see you convincing me of them because I don't see the evidence that I should believe any of that stuff. And he understood. He was receptive to that. And we have not talked about religion. Now, we talk about controversial issues all the time. And he has actually become more liberal as he's aged, which is surprising. But we're still able to have those conversations because we do have this one boundary.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think that's super, super important to figure out those boundaries and what you want to talk about and how you want to organize those conversations. Ricardo, I really want to talk to you more about this, but we actually have a lot of people who are waiting on the line right now and who really want to talk to us. And I already said that I want to try to take everybody tonight. So I think I do want to end the conversation at least right here. But if you have further questions about how to talk to people and how to do those conversations, I have a YouTube video of me talking about street epistemology on my personal channel that you can look at. It's like 45 minutes where I kind of explain that and go over some examples and things. And I would suggest that you check out the chat for people who probably have some examples and some other resources for you as well, if you're able to watch this live. I'm really sorry I can't talk to you anymore, Ricardo, but we've got so many callers. I need to move on and pick up the pace of it. But thank you so much. I feel really bad because like he called from Italy. Also, he was waiting a long time. And I want to say more.
He was.
This is a call that we get pretty frequently, right? It's like I want to be able to, you know, give advice when I can, but there's other clips. There's other times of me talking about it. I'd say go look those up. I'm sorry I wasn't able to tell you in person, but if you look up how to talk to people, I'm pretty sure there's like a playlist on our channel right now where you can do that. So, so thank you again, Ricardo, for calling in. And we're just gonna roll right through, folks. If you notice tonight, I'm skipping a lot of the things that I usually tell you to do.
Lightning round.
Yeah, I'm you know, usually we talk about you know, donating to us as a nonprofit and also supporting us in other ways like becoming a member or buying from our shop. And you can do that, folks, and that is totally fine. But tonight I really want to focus on how you can help the people around you. If you decide that you want to donate money to us, and that's cool, you can do that tonight. But I encourage you, use that money to help other people today. Use that money to help figure out how you can plan plan for activities and plan with other organizations, other nonprofits that are helping out with the cause. Again, in the future, I want to be able to have some more resources prepared for this specific issue. And you can also, again, refer to the ACA's website when talking about our stance on this issue as well and how we feel about it. But, you know, tonight I want to focus on us and get through this together. Really, this is a sense of a grieving process for me because I really feel pretty hopeless today in reading and preparing for talking to you guys tonight. And I don't want to leave you guys with a sense of hopelessness. I want to leave you guys with something. And I'm desperately trying to figure out what that is. And right now it's solidarity. That's what I can offer you, but not apathy. Not apathy. Never apathy. We'll continue to talk about this, and we will continue to raise awareness and to work in the means that we can to make change, whatever that may be. But for now, let's keep rolling here. We have somebody who just wants to go by a Truth Wanted caller. She's calling in from New Jersey. Truth Wanted caller, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Great. I have my headphones on. Yeah, so I think the long-term repercussions of this will be that maybe the states haven't thought about is a potential brain drain. Women and men as well probably will not consider going to their universities with this situation. And I know my daughter will be graduating. My daughter will be graduating soon, and she's already said, Mom, no way I'm going to look for jobs in those states. No way.
I'm saying holy shit because I never even thought about this. Wow.
Yep.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, people who have a privileged means to be able to decide where they want to go to college or where they want to move to or where they want to do for the job, like this is going to be a deciding factor. It really, really is. And like, there's a part of me that would want to get out of here in Texas if it wasn't for the fact that I really plan on staying here. If it weren't for this issue. And gosh, that sucks. You're totally right. Brain drain because of a lack of abortion access. Yeah, absolutely. Jason?
You know, there is a Austin, Canada. I'm just throwing that out there.
Is it cool?
So,
though?
You know, you can still.
Is the vibe
I
good?
mean, from what we would have to ask our brothers and sisters to the north whether it is, but you know, it's at least an option so that you can still have the atheist community of Austin. It's just atheists of community of Austin, Canada.
Listen, Canada is going to have American refugees in the coming years. You understand this? Like there's going to there's going to be an American to Canada migration crisis. Like that is something that will happen. Anyway, Truth Wanted call, you had some more to say.
Oh no, I was just going to agree with you that Canada and other locations will benefit from this. But and then they'll put more pressure on admissions in the open states. So it'd be very interesting fall. See what happens with college admissions.
It's also possible that we will see pressure, because we've already seen pressure from corporations who realize that their customer base doesn't like what's going on. Now, whether or not that fully goes into the direction that they want, like Coca-Cola leaving Georgia, it would be interesting if that happened, and if that was the actual cause of what is going on. But yeah,
I don't want people to rely on.
We're all seeing it bleak right now.
I don't want people to rely on
corporate
subsidies to get their fucking health care, Jason. I don't think that's
no.
I'm
not talking about that at all.
You know what I mean? But you get what I'm saying though, right?
Yeah.
It's like we shouldn't even be having this conversation, man.
I agree, but we are, and so we need every little bit of help we can, because we do see that, if enough people, voice their opinion, if more people say, hey, we want other things, I don't want to make this about, a corporate or capitalistic thing, because, that is disgusting in of itself. I'm just saying that it's possible. It is something that, let's wait and see what's happening, but also, not wait and see. Let's see what's happening and still continue to fight the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts, Truth Wanted caller?
Oh no, it's up to you guys to carry it through. I just wanted to start a conversation.
Great. Well, you definitely started a conversation and you got us talking. So I'd say mission complete there. Thank you for giving me another thing in which to worry about now. No, but seriously, it's a great topic. It's a great thing to bring up. I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, obviously I've thought about people moving because of this, but going to college and stuff, that's just more to.
We don't know the extent of the damage, because when an area, the brain drain, as she referenced it. So the area becomes less educated. I'm hesitant to use that kind of language in this, but if it becomes less educated, becomes more poor, and becomes more religious, it's a frightening. You're absolutely right. It's a frightening situation, and people will have to make hard choices, and sometimes you can't make those hard choices because of your situation.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's not fair for somebody, for our country to be like, well, this is a law now, so if you don't like it, you just have to move. Well, that is literally some people's mentality. No. They're like, oh, well, you just have to deal with it. And I think that's fucking bullshit. It's not something that we should deal with. It's not something that we should be dealing with on an individual states' rights level. I've already talked about this, but anyway, we've got some more people to talk to. We're powering through these calls, Jason. I'm going to talk to Nick now. Nick, who's calling in from Virginia. Nick, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Jason. First of all, Dan, I'm a huge fan of you and Truth Wanted. I've been a listener for at least a couple of years that I can remember off the top of my head, so I appreciate it.
Wow. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for saying that. It's so crazy. It's weird thinking I've been doing this for a few years now. It's crazy to think that there's people who've been following me that long. You guys are awesome. By the way, shout outs to everybody who follows me on Twitter, but also who always just says nice things, because sometimes, like today, it's like, man, this is so fucking hard to talk about. But thank you. Thank you for the support. So what's going on, Nick? How can we help?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up this, it can especially ring true today, but this kind of got on my head a few weeks ago. So briefly after the events in Uvalde, I got into a good old Facebook argument with someone about gun control and about the whole concept of it. And after going back and forth and me citing several sources about what can be done and how things can change and how things can get better, this person, after several interactions, just said, look, no matter what you say, no matter what anyone says to me, no matter what sites you source or whatever. He said, no one's going to change my mind. No one's taking my guns away. I don't care what you think. This is my opinion. And that's how it is. And it got me to thinking like, wow, like there are plenty of people who believe things, and regardless of how well or how poorly founded those beliefs are and whatever's presented to them, they are never going to give up those beliefs, and they're just going to continue believing for bad reasons. Yeah. So how do we, as a society, and how do we confront people who hold beliefs like this, who don't want to change, who refuse to change, and how do we progress and confront issues like abortion rights and gun violence and so on, when a portion of the population just doesn't give a shit and doesn't want to change their view?
Well, Nick, that's a great thing to talk about. You know, we're supposed to be living in a democracy so that, like, it doesn't matter if you can't change the 1% of people's minds. We're still going to do it, right? Like, that's supposed to be how it works. Obviously, the system hasn't been working that way. I learned something recently about people with schizophrenia, funnily enough. And I saw something that said that about 50% of people who suffer from schizophrenia, and there's different typings of schizophrenia. So I don't know if this is talking about all schizophrenia or just specific typings, but about 50% suffer from something called ignosis. And this is this idea that they actually don't know that they're sick. They actually aren't even aware of the issues that are causing, you know, that mental illness. And I think about, I was reading this and I just thought, man, how much does that apply to just regular people about their beliefs? Not saying that the average person is sick, but that the average person just doesn't even realize how far deep the rabbit hole sometimes their beliefs are, or where even the foundations of their beliefs even lie. Because you can look at that conversation I had with Anthony Magnabosco when I was a Christian, and I was pretty Christian at the time, right? Like I said things that just weren't rational, that just didn't make sense, that, you know, the YouTube comment section already pointed out how, you know, ludicrous some of the things I said, but that was the culture I was raised in. That was the environment that I was brought up in. And so that was literally my brain. My brain was just exposed to only these ideas. And it wasn't until I was exposed to ideas outside of that I began to change. So I think above all else, exposure is kind of key here. I wanted to talk about earlier, Nick, before this stuff happened, about how people were freaking out about the new Lightyear movie because there was a scene of two women kissing for like less than a second. Everybody's like, whoa, we can't have the agenda shut down. But like, that's actually exactly the right thing to do. Like that normalizing it and putting it out there is how you move that Overton window, is how you get people talking. So I think like the best thing we can do as individual people is at least bring it up. At least put it in people's minds. At least plant that seed. We may not be able to get people all the way over individually, right? Not all of us are skilled in that art of communication, but also it's just hard to change people's minds, right? Like there's a reason you go to therapy multiple times. Usually you don't go to therapy and all of your problems get fixed in one talk session. But it does happen through going back, and it does happen through repeated exposure. So I think just continuing to have that conversation, it really does help. It really does make a difference, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes. But I think that's the best I got, Nick. That's really the best I got. I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
No,
I would say that if you feel that the person is worth it, that you may not think you can reach this person now. You may not think you can reach this person 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But if you think that this person is worth it, that they're a friend, they're a colleague, they're a family member, or they're just some crazy guy on the street that you met and you're like, no, I want to talk with this person because their hair is cool. I don't know. But if you think that this person is worth having the conversation, it's going to be a slog. It's going to be an absolute slog. But like Dan said, keep having it. Keep exposing this person to better ideas. To ideas that are much more rational, that do comport with reality, and don't just rely on the gut. Well, they're not going to take my this, that, and the other thing away. I mean, you could go the snarky way and mention to them that the United States government has M1 tanks and he has a AR-15, he's not going to win that battle. Whatever it takes to, say, hey, there are better ways.
I mean, look at, like, this sounds like a terrible example, but look at the radicalization of Nazis in this country right now. And how is that happening? They're being exposed on places like 4chan, seriously. And alt-right groups on Twitter and Facebook are posting these things. Like, that's how that's happening. Their discourse is not rational. Their discourse is not something that I could argue into a conclusion that should be reasonable to believe. However, just that pure exposure alone is enough to get people somewhere. And that is fucking scary, but it also says something about the human mind. It says something that when you reach your fingers out there, you can try to get those people. And they're acting covertly. They're being real secretive about it. I don't know. We have to be even louder. But Nick, go ahead.
I will give you a much better example of exposure just as someone who grew up in a very far right, a very Christian household. I went to college at a Baptist university one town over, and after college, I am a communist and I am an anti-theist. So if I can unpack it, anyone can, 10 minutes from home.
See, Nick, you went to that liberal college and they gave you that communist ideology. So
no, the Baptist Southern University in backwoods East Tennessee gave me that communist anti-theist talking to.
So Nick, you answered your own question. You answered your own question. That's great.
I understand that exposure helps a lot, and I understand that you were speaking with a caller from Italy that street epistemology can make a huge difference. I know those things help, but in a time where things can seem really hopeless, and where the decision today was made by 3 individuals who were appointed to the highest court in the land by a president who didn't win the popular vote and was impeached twice. And so it definitely feels like
currently
a
under
minority
investigation.
can control. It definitely feels like a minority can control over half of the population. And so those things can feel really doom and gloom.
It can. Nick, there are things that I just simply cannot advocate for because legally I cannot, and I'm on a call-in show, and that's produced by a nonprofit. Let me leave it at that. Okay, there are examples of direct action that people have chosen to take and have chosen to do because effectively they believe that the system as it is broken. And I can't comment on that, but I will say, for our own mental health standpoint, if you want to work within the system as most effectively as you can, I really think what we kind of laid out is some of what you can do besides joining other organizations that are trying to make meaningful change and trying to unite other people. I mean, I think I'm trying my best by doing this show here, and that's honestly, Nick, that's what helps me sleep at night. Because at least I can say, well, there's going to be a couple hundred people that listen to this. That's more than what most people do. You know what I mean? It's like I can do that for myself, but obviously not everybody can do that. You kind of have to figure out your own path there,
No, I appreciate everything that you do, even on the smaller show on a ACA. I love your show and I love everything you do. Before you let me go and before you move on, I just want to promote to anyone who can, or anyone has access to, or anyone is medically able to. I personally, to protect myself and my partner, I scheduled my consultation for my vasectomy today, and am planning to go fulfill that. If you have access to it and you can, and you're medically able to, and that fits your life course, I would absolutely suggest that. And I would suggest also to anyone, be careful what you post on social media. Make sure that you're helping your neighbor, make sure that you're helping those friends around you, but make sure that you're also protecting yourself and that you're not putting more information on the internet than is necessary, and make sure that you're watching your back legally as well, especially if you live in some of the states that have already imposed trigger laws.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
I'm living a liberal bastion.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nick, for calling in, and thanks again for the kind words. Again, when people call in and say nice things, I don't know, it humbles me. It really does, because I'm really glad people enjoyed the show. Obviously, there's a lot of people that help make shows like this happen. It's not just me. It's folks like Jason and it's folks like the crew, who also believe in the spirit of what this show is trying to accomplish, but also the other shows here at the Atheist Community of Austin. So thank you to everyone who helps make the show, and thank you to everyone who supports it. It really does mean the absolute world to me. We're going to try to take one more call tonight, and then wrap things up for the day. We're going to talk to Dylan, who's calling in from New York. Dylan, you are live on Truth Wanted. How's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Dylan, not great. It's been a crazy day.
That's a tricky question.
You know. I hope you appreciate honesty, because that's what I have to give you. Anyway, what's going on?
Well, about a couple months ago, I came up with an idea, and I've been trying to share it with a couple of people, and it was to replace the internet, or not replace the internet. I wanted to replace our legal system with polling through internet or social media means, because we can't really get a popular vote in this country, and there's no safeguard to make sure that the majority of people who have a like mind actually see that their view is represented.
Did you say?
Hold on,
Dylan,
I saw this
replace,
episode of Black Mirror before.
Did you say replace votes with internet memes? Did I hear you right?
No.
Oh, okay.
That would be...
I was like, what does that look like? A memocracy? That's crazy. Anyway, please explain, because I obviously misheard.
So basically, like, the Supreme Court obviously made decisions that most of us can, in America, can not agree with. And I believe that if we had a safeguard like a polling system through private servers for the American people, that when issues come up, that time would be delegated to debate the issues ahead of time, and that you could vote on the issue.
So Dylan,
that way
one thing really quick. Are you on a speakerphone?
No,
we're getting a lot of noise. We're getting a lot of noise from you.
I'm so sorry. Does that help a little bit?
No,
actually, we got a little bit more noise. But here's the thing. I've seen this episode of Black Mirror. I've seen this episode of Orville, and the problem is, and we've seen it in chat. Our friend of the show and crewmate Vern, says that's where you get Bodie McBoatface for a response. And as a cybersecurity expert, I can tell you that is such a terrible idea. To open it up
there's a reason
like
why you
that.
can't vote online.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't want to attack your idea, except that it's not something that can really work.
Not yet. Not yet, Jason. Not yet. Wait until the transhumanist revolution, okay? And we've all got computers in our eyeballs, and then maybe we can implement it, right? But
if I can upload myself to the cloud, I would, but that's not the point.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with Jason. Like I don't know realistically how that functions, to be honest with you. I don't think that's gonna work. We have enough trouble getting democracy as it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, Dylan.
You want Comcast to carry our vote? No, thank you.
Yeah. There is that element too.
You're right.
But you're the last call of the night, Dylan. You have anything else you want to talk about? Because you were waiting on a while, on the line to talk to us for a bit.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the time to talk about this. I really wanted someone, obviously, who had interest in cybersecurity and things like that. really give me some input on that. So I really appreciate that.
There you
Well,
go.
you're welcome.
Well, it's a good thing Jason's with us today, because Jason is one of our tech dudes. So he can tell you. I'm glad he can be straightforward with you and just say no, which is hilarious. But hey, Dylan, thanks so much for calling, and thanks so much for supporting the show. You rock. And I don't know if you're driving or what, but consider upgrading your telecommunications infrastructure, my friend, because that was very, very hard to hear you, but we made it work, right?
Yeah, if you're going to vote on that phone, I would say no.
Yeah, don't vote on that phone. Or bring any internet company or like telecommunications company. I don't know. None of them are trustworthy. But hey, folks, we are going to be wrapping up this show. Again, normally, well, first, let me give a special thanks to Jason for being on. I would say, where can people find you? But Jason, you're usually here. You're usually on the crew cam. Any other specific things you want to plug?
Me.
Yeah, that's Jason.
Well, of course, the nonprofits. You know, definitely check them out. The flagship show of the ACA, because there's certain things that we can't do, but we will fight the good fight by keeping you informed.
Yeah, and again, folks, usually during the show, I'm telling you to donate to the ACA and help donate to continue to make shows like this happen. And we welcome that. But I asked Greg, our executive producer tonight, if I can make sure that today's tone will be a little bit different, because I want to make sure that the issue at hand is what's most important. So if you've been thinking about donating for a while, consider using your money to help with organizations that are advocating for these issues, and organizations that are continuing to try to help people who are in needs of the kind of healthcare that is being slowly stripped away from this country. I think they could use it today. So I give them permission to say, you use that as you will. But we also appreciate the support or every time that you do that too. And if you donate on Patreon, we will give you a shout out, of course. But we are going to go ahead and wrap up today's show. I really didn't want to wrap it up on a somber note, but I guess I kind of have to. That being said, despite the challenges that are here, and despite the challenges that will continue to come here, as long as you watch this show and as long as I'm here, I will have solidarity with you, and I will continue to fight and continue to advocate for the rights of people with uteruses, but also people everywhere to have access to the healthcare that they need, because I believe that's incredibly important and something that has to be said and has to be done. Before we go, I need to give a quick thank you to the crew for making this show happen like they do every single week. Look at that crew cam and cat. Cats are here too. And my cat was here too as well. Shout outs to Pico for making his appearance. And thank you to everybody for supporting the show. Yeah, Jason's usually the one that's doing that too. If you want to email the show, it's truth@atheist-community.org. And I encourage you guys to check out the Atheist Community of Austin website. It's gone through some changes and stuff. There's some new stuff to look at out there. It's atheist-community.org to do that. And I believe I have some other emails to talk about as well, if the crew could put that on screen. And if not, then I'll talk away. But yeah, we have tv@atheist-community.org if you want to send something that's a little bit more general, not specific to this show. And I think that we have got one more new email address that we want to send out, right? No, just the one. Okay, that's cool too. Anyway, thank you to everybody for your support, and thank you for everybody for speaking out. For always and forever, always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central, between The Theist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.